The Greater Houston Women's Chamber of Commerce and Houston PBS present Breakthrough Women.
Effective leaders really lay out the objective, the purpose, provide clarity, and lay out a path to success for their organization, their team, whoever it is that they're leading. They need to be able to see the forest, but they also need to understand the details of the business and the trees that make up that forest.
I feel it's my responsibility as a leader to really look around me and hire the best and the brightest. And then it's my job to ask them what do they need to succeed. I'm not a micromanager. I need to get out of their way, but I need to also ask them what is it they need from me, and then I need to support them so that they can be successful.
Taking that individual and really having that conversation with them and celebrating those small things with whether it's a small accomplishment that individual had, you all of a sudden start seeing the self-confidence come out and push them a little bit harder and a little bit harder, and then one day they see their own potential.
I think women have an empathy, and they have an ability to calm and an ability to see people, to see things in people that people may not see in themselves. I think men can do that as well, but men tend to be turned inward. They know their own strengths. They have basically a male ego that serves them well. And I say that in a positive sense. Women tend to look at others more. And so for that reason, I think it gives them the ability to help people become what they wouldn't become by themselves.
I think women tend to be very insightful. I think that many times, and I've observed this myself, even trying to be disconnected from myself in a meeting, just observing women is after a meeting, we'll have a debrief, and the women will always come up with the things that were behind the messages that were said, as opposed to necessarily what the words were. And I think it's being able to read in maybe a bit deeper, read people's body languages, read their intent.
I believe, we as women have incredible ability to hear maybe what's not spoken. We are good with the interpersonal skills. We listen, I'm not knocking men, but we do listen. And we understand each other on a level that's different in many ways.
I'm really inspired by being part of something that's bigger than I am and contributing something to an organization that will be here long after I'm gone. And so, for example, I look at the Port of Houston. It's been here for 100 years, and I would certainly expect it to be here another 100 years, if not longer. And so that's very exciting to me to play a part in the history of a 100-year organization that I anticipate will be here for many generations to come and contributing to that success.
I measure success in this stage of my life as what legacy am I leaving? What brand do I have? So you work for many years ensuring that you are successful, whether it's monetary or whether it's, self-fulfillment. I mean, there's so many reasons how people measure success, but this particular time in my life, it's truly about what legacy am I going to leave, not only for the family, but also for the individuals that I work with. Did I impact their lives in a positive way? If I did, then I was successful. So when someone says, describe vanilla, what will they say? And that's how I measure success, is truly by how I'm paying this forward and did I impact others.
If you told me years ago I would be doing what I'm doing, I would never have guessed. And this is where my faith plays an important part of my life. And
A book by Jerry Sitzer called A Grace Disguised, he says, paraphrasing him, that the experience of loss doesn't have to be the defining moment of your life, but rather the response to that loss. It's not so much what happens to you that matters, but what happens in you. And I found that with faith and choosing to let Him, God transformed me in ways I would never have imagined. And my faith, my family, and my friends, including my Bellows colleagues, have helped me and sustained me on that journey. And it has turned into an exciting journey.
I lost a dear friend to breast cancer, and she was very young and has 2 small children, and there are several of us that went through, getting married together, meeting our husbands, getting married, having children together. And to go through that, having recently gone through that, what was amazing was to watch her strength and her courage. It was a short battle, unfortunately. From the day of diagnosis until she passed was only about 18 months. But to watch her, and in the end, even when you walked in on those final days and she would say, "How are you? Tell me about you, tell me about work. I remember last week you were doing something," or "Tell me about the kids," and so that has inspired me, just her journey and her battle and just what lives on and with her husband and her children. I think those are things, again, that we take things for granted sometimes, and so just some inspiration personally of making sure I can make a difference, because I've got so much to give.
You have to figure out through time how you juggle all the balls, and if you drop one, is it going to bounce or is it going to break? And the trick is to drop the ones that are going to bounce and not the ones that are going to break.
I always say to women that I know that I'm mentoring, you can have it all, just not necessarily at the same time. So what is important to you to have is different when you're 20 years old versus when you're 54 years old. And knowing what those are is actually where the magic comes.
Education is paramount to fulfillment and success. It's the one thing that can never be taken away from you. Your material goods can be taken away from you, but your education, who you are inside, can never be taken away from you. And it is vitally important, I believe, that everyone get as much education as they can.
There are so many doors that education opens, especially for women. And it's imperative that we teach young girls particularly, and young women even these days, that an education for them can mean the difference between being self-sufficient and not being self-sufficient.
Women make up 50% of the workforce, but they only make up about 1/4 of STEM-related jobs, and they make up only 14% of engineering jobs. And there is no reason that women shouldn't make up a higher percentage of STEM-related jobs in the workplace. Because technology is going to be so important in the future, we need everyone who has an interest and an inclination to move into STEM-related jobs to go that way. Women, men, we need the diversity and the difference of experiences and views. And so it's very, very important that we keep women in the workforce in STEM-related jobs.
All of my fellow colleagues in the business have been supportive. It's been wonderful. And true that construction tends to be a male-dominated business, and I believe we are the largest general contractor, majority controlled by a woman in Texas. So that's a little different, but we still have a great team. And I am seeing more and more women come into the business as far as engineers, and of course in architecture there are a lot of women. We hire the best people, but this last go round of hiring, 30% of them have been women.
When I entered law school, there were 5 women out of 100 freshmen. 3 of us made it. 2 of us practiced law. 1 only still practices law, and that would be me. I think that the challenges during that time weren't that there wasn't equality for women, because there was equality in the early 80s. But in the law profession, there were very few women. And so when people have done things the same way and expected things to be the same way for a very long time, it's very difficult for them to change. So my challenges were, for example, a law professor who told me I would never make a lawyer and I really needed to go home and probably get married. Or a judge. In my first year of practicing law, I was in a courtroom and an older judge in front of an entire courtroom said to me, "You really need to go home and make babies." Well, that was difficult. It was hard not to burst into tears, I can assure you. But as my dad would have said, you dry up and you go on your own way, put your shoulders back and get your job done. And that's what I did.
When I started with Arthur Andersen, which was in 1979 when I graduated from college, there were very few women, as a matter of fact. I remember when I made manager at Arthur Andersen in 1984, I was known as the experiment because there really weren't any women. So most of my mentors, particularly in my early career, were men. And I think what I would tell women today is it doesn't have to be women that are your mentor. If you're women, you can have someone who's passionate about you and caring about you and can actually see your career through their eyes and actually help you see it clearer. I think having mentors, having a number of mentors, because you can relate to one individual on a particular thing and then another individual on something else. So it's important to be able to have those mentors consistently throughout your career. They'll change throughout your career because you change.
I can tell you about a breakthrough moment, but I can't tell you exactly when it occurred. But there was a point in my adult life when I figured out that life doesn't happen to me, that I create the life that I want. I'm not a bystander to life. I am the architect of who I am and what my future will look like.